What's going on, everybody? So in this video, we are going to be talking about what's going on in the NFT market, some major NFT updates, as well as some upcoming projects you definitely don't want to miss out on. First thing we got to talk about is what's going on in the market sentiment. So for the most part, things have been moving pretty sideways since yesterday. Nothing going crazy with ETH. It's kind of been at that 1.6 level for quite some time. There hasn't really been much, additional volume moving into the NFT space, but the major projects like Mutant Ape, Azuki, Moonbirds, and things like that, they kind of pumped a little bit or have remained stable, which is great. With the whole BendDAO situation where a lot of these assets might have been liquidated, it seems like that isn't going to happen with the stability of the NFT prices so far, and with that pump in ETH, it didn't get lower than like 1.5. So overall, not too bad. Personally, for me, I'm still looking to get in some projects when the prices get really low, and I think that's a possibility. I definitely do take a gamble in the sense of like trying to look for the best price, and maybe I'll miss the opportunity, but I prefer to get it as low as possible when everybody's like very bearish on NFTs and everybody's quitting. For me, that's really the time where I want to buy certain projects because, in general, I don't find it necessary to take a risk to purchase the price now when I think things probably can get lower. But again, I could be completely wrong. Maybe we go in a bull market from here. If that's the case, that's also good for my bags as well, right? So either way, you got to be in a position where, whether things go up or down, you're in the right place to potentially make some money. First project we're going to talk about is going to be the Hello Kitty and Friends, which is also by RECUR. And if you weren't familiar, RECUR is basically like an NFT Web3 agency that helps a lot of IPs like Hey Arnold, Rugrats, Care Bears. Those are some of the projects that they're working on. And Hello Kitty and Friends is another project where it was more like a bidding process, right? So you can see like the last sale for these was 8.5, 3.9, 3.9. They definitely went with limited collection on this one. So for these particular ones, the people that did win the bids are going to get a one-of-one hand-drawn Hello Kitty and Friends and some kind of NFT pack from the Hello Kitty and Friends website, right? Also, it seems like the public sale for the actual 10K PFP collection is coming out on August 25th, which is today at the time of this recording in my time zone at least. So it's probably going to come out maybe tomorrow or by the time this video comes out. Now, one thing I want to kind of give a word of caution to is that for RECUR, right, if you go on their Twitter page, you can see that they are doing a lot of NFT projects, from the Nickelodeon one with Rugrats and Hey Arnold. They have a Care Bear ones coming out. They have this other one, NFTU, which is a marketplace for NFTs. I don't know too much about that one, but when we're kind of looking at like what they are kind of doing, the issue for me is they're kind of using the same format. Like if you go on their different websites, the Hello Kitty website, the Hey Arnold, Rugrats website, it's kind of like they're not really promising anything when they put this out, right? So when we're going on the Nickelodeon website, it's kind of like cool. There's like this is some kind of challenge. How it works is kind of like you buy a collectible, you can trade it in, get some slime, and then you can combine your NFTs. Is that really valuable for people, to get more NFTs? And for a lot of people, maybe the answer is no, right? We're going to the Hello Kitty World website. It's kind of like the same thing, like they're kind of like creating this game for adults, I suppose, where you get a character, you travel to different cities and you collect stamps, and then you get those stamps so that you can get a snapshot. And it's like, okay, so it's kind of like this game where you collect NFTs to trade NFTs, and then in the end you're going to get something, and it's like, well, in the end net, what is that something going to be worth? And it's just like nobody really knows. So it becomes really speculative, right? So when we're looking at, let's say, the Nickelodeon floor price, nothing against them, but it's just like the reality is that a lot of people don't really value this as much as they did when they first came out, right? I remember like everybody was buying it. Steve Aoki was buying it. Floor was like 0.3, getting close to 0.4, and then all of a sudden it's like there's no interest in it now, right? So it's like, yes, you can play these games, yes, you can collect whatever, then combine these NFTs to get another thing, but then people are going to ask like, okay, but what's the point? And I feel like if they weren't IPs that people recognize, let's say like Hey Arnold and like Hello Kitty and Care Bears, well, if you just replace like like a Hey Arnold character with like another random character, would it be valuable for people? Probably not, right? And so they're definitely leveraging the fact that they're using these strong IPs that have deep history with a lot of people in this demographic. But when it comes to the NFT like utility side, it's like I have a lot of questions of like, what do people actually get? And if those questions aren't really answered, then it's like, how valuable can it be? So I'm not saying it's a good or bad project, or maybe, they haven't had enough time to execute on the roadmap, but those are the things that I would pay attention to if you're looking to buy, because in the end, you have to ask, what do people actually get in the end? And it can't be just another NFT, right? Because that's just something that's probably not that sustainable if that's all they get, right? So again, not saying it's a bad project. I'm just saying that those are the risks I see when you look into those projects. And maybe there are things I don't know. Maybe their website doesn't clearly explain it. Maybe they choose not to explain it on Twitter. Whatever the case is, it's not very clear what you get. And that is the responsibility of the project to make it absolutely crystal clear on all platforms. And by the way, if you are interested in NFT marketing, especially especially. We actually are doing these bi-weekly Parallax Academy courses teaching you all about how NFT projects are run, how they do their marketing, how they create, value for a project and everything like that. And we're actually going to have a session next week. I'm still deciding on the topic, but most likely we're going to be talking about how NFT Ponzi's work, how bag holding culture works in the NFT space, which is terrible for anyone who is the last one holding the bag. We're going to explain the psychology of how projects can even make this happen, why people buy it. And we're also going to give you some ideas on how to create a project that doesn't even have bag holding, where you're actually creating real value. So those are going to be some very interesting, in my personal opinion, quite innovative topics not many people are talking about. And I'm really trying to push the Parallax to, get into this education game and really educate people to make the space better. So if that vibes with you, if that's something you're interested in, make sure to check out the Parallax Genesis, because these live courses are going to happen every around 2 weeks, but you have to be a Parallax holder to be involved and also get the recordings of this as well. It's not available for everyone, I'm sorry, but it is available for all my Parallax fam out there. Now, in other news, there's this project called Ready Player Me, kind of similar to Ready Player One, if you think about it, like the name at least. And then A16Z actually led the round of $56 million in the Series B round for this avatar project. Now, what is this avatar project exactly? Well, you can't really buy anything, so there's no NFT to invest in, but essentially this is a project where they are helping brands and companies create these digital metaverse assets that you supposedly can use in many different places, right? And so the challenge here that they're solving is every individual metaverse world is going to have its own technical challenges, right? Just because you have a high fidelity, super high quality 3D character over here, it doesn't mean you can bring it into a low polygon count world, right? It just doesn't fit technologically. So I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a standard where, you create this avatar, and it just so happens that they did all the back end really well so that you can use this avatar in many different worlds, not just limited to one. And the challenge that projects have when they're building a metaverse is they're going to say okay, we're building this world, you can buy land, things like that, and we're going to have these characters. Well, it's possible that those characters can only be used in their specific world, and you can't really take it out to another world because there's a lot of technical back end challenges with that. And so for this company, if you're able to have this passport, metaverse passport, basically it's your character with certain clothes and styles and emotes and things like that, can you bring that to different worlds? And if you can, then that's actually a pretty big game changer. Just have that ability to cross-pollinate your avatar in different worlds, right? So it seems like you can take a selfie, design your own character. You can actually create your own avatar now, but I'm not sure where you can use it quite yet. But the fact that A16Z is coming into it, and all these other celebrity investors as well, such as Kevin Hart, Twitch co-founder Justin Khan, and so on and so forth. I'm pretty sure there's more if you really look into it. Quite an interesting project indeed, because whether you can't really invest in this yourself because there's no NFT to buy, but you have to pay attention to okay, for an NFT world or a metaverse project, any NFT that promises you a metaverse, this company, they raised tens of millions of dollars to kind of create these avatars. So if you expect a project to raise $1 million and create a metaverse, you have to think okay, well, how good is it actually going to be compared to a company that only does these avatars? You see what I mean? So it kind of makes you see the truth behind when an NFT project raises money, and they promise certain things, you can kind of see through what they say doesn't really match what they actually can do with the money that they raise. So that is an interesting lesson for sure for anybody to learn. Now, a new project that I recently came across is this one called Deep Objects AI. So I'm not exactly sure what it is. I went on the website, I went on their Twitter pages, I went on a lot of different things, and it's they're actually not very clear on what they're doing. But from what I can gather based on the information they put out, they are pretty strong in 3D. They probably will create 3D assets in NFTs. It seems like for the teasers, it's a lot of sneakers and stuff like that. So I'm guessing they're going to create objects like shoes, statues, things that you can collect, maybe clothing, and then probably integrate that with the different metaverses is my guess. But hey, it's anyone's guess from here, right? Because it's not very clear on what's up. But it's a new project. It's by a studio called FTR. And again, going on their website, it's pretty unclear on what they do. So I'm not sure if they did it on purpose to create that vibe of hey, we're mysterious, you should check us out. It's an interesting thing that if you want to check out, check them out. Now, moving into some mainstream news, M&m has recently partnered with Kingship, and Kingship is going to be a kind of a musical band that was formed together using 4 Bored Apes. So it's not necessarily the people behind the apes, the personalities and the musicians that form this band can be actually interchanged, but the 4 apes, which is the mutant, laser beam, this king looking one, and the golden one, those ones will never change, right? So it's an example. It's kind of like the gorillas, they have these animated characters that are a band. This one's just using NFTs. So this band is signed to one of the major record labels. I forgot which one exactly. I think it might be Universal, but correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, they partnered up with M&M's, and they are doing a collaboration to sell M&M candy. So it's this one's a limited 100 edition. This is a limited box, and then they have the jars. So it's an interesting use case of of, let's say, a IP like Bored Ape coming together to create a band, and then that brand going out to a brand like M&M's to, you know, do some kind of branding deal, partnership in order to possibly make revenue. So it's making it more and more possible and giving people more ideas of like, okay, like, you know, I can use this IP and actually make money from it. So I can imagine like, I don't know, a bunch of CloneX people or a bunch of Azuki people, a bunch of Doodles people, you know, they get together, they form something and they do these partnership with these brands. And for these brands, the reason why they want to do it is because they want to be on the cusp of being an innovator in the NFT space and technology in general, right? So for them, just creating a limited edition, like Bored Ape branded thing, it's not really that difficult, right? And they could say like, hey, we are the first candy company to do a partnership with Kingship and Bored Ape and things like that. So you're definitely going to see a lot more brands in all sectors getting into the space, right? We started first with like Nike and Adidas getting into the space. Now we're getting candy companies. We're probably going to get more jewelry companies, watch companies like Hublot with Takashi Murakami, which kind of relates to NFT in some senses, right? Even though he's a fine artist, there's many different ways to spin it. And I think we're going to see more and more of this cross-pollination because these big brands, they got to stay relevant, right? It's like they don't make money from this. It's really just branding to get people to talk about it, like me, to talk about it for free, right? But they're really selling candy. So they're making money when you go to the gas station and you want to pick up some M&Ms because you saw that Kingship did a thing, you know, way back on Twitter, and it's like imprinted in your head. So that's why you buy the M&M. Like that's what they're looking for. Very interesting to see like how these branding things play out, but I'm following along just to see some mainstream examples and real use cases of people using IP to generate revenue in the real world. Now, a quick little update when it comes to CloneX. Seems like CloneX has started migrating some of their metadata into on-chain. And I know this is a little nerdy. A lot of people are like, well, what does that mean? Does it matter? It kind of does. Long story short, the more things are on-chain, it's more permanent, right? So like if it's off-chain, if it's like on some database somewhere, even if it's like an IPFS, now we're speaking pretty nerdy, but pretty much if it's in a database, yes, someone can potentially change it and things like that. But when it's on-chain, it's like permanently there. So I think a lot of the projects are moving more towards on-chain. And I know Moonbirds are very like big believers in moving like all their data and images and stuff on-chain as well. So it's going to be interesting to see like the brands that believe they can survive like, you know, 100 years. They're the ones that are going to really think and put in the resources to put it on-chain to make it like immutable and like nobody can change it. You know, it's not easy to do, especially with today's technology and today's people understanding of how blockchain works. But it's just a little update with CloneX, right? Now, the next update we have is a random one that doesn't necessarily relate to NFTs itself, but it relates to OpenAI, which is like an artificial company that's pretty much like advancing AI technology for everybody, right? And I believe it's open source, so like anybody can use it. So essentially, basically, the artificial intelligence created like a bunch of different clothing for this girl, and it's kind of like moving in real time, and it kind of just like matches based on where the camera is, which is actually pretty advanced. So that's actually pretty bullish for the space because it doesn't necessarily relate to NFTs directly, but as a technology advances, people have different ideas of how to use that technology in NFTs, right? So if you have a jacket, for example, how is that jacket going to fit on different character models, whether they have different body shapes and sizes and things like that? Well, can artificial intelligence like reform the jacket to fit that particular character model in a very natural way and have it move and everything in the metaverse? Possibly, right? And so those kind of ideas like pop into the imagination for a lot of creators. So, you know, you definitely want to watch technology and see how it advances in the NFT space to see what is truly on the forefront of technology, because the great ideas, sometimes you're just like taking an idea that already exists and applying it to NFTs. And if someone can take a novel idea that just came out, like that's open source, they can take open source ideas and just like copy and paste the code because it's open source, put it in their project and be like, hey, you know, our NFT can do X, Y, and Z. So that's something you definitely want to follow along from like a business perspective. I know it's more like B2B and like on the back end, but those are the things you need to see to be on the forefront and understand trends before, you know, the mainstream NFT space does. And that's pretty much how you know, kind of get in front of everybody when it comes to like, you know, knowing what to buy when nobody knows about it. So with that said, that is everything we got to cover for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next one.